Therefore, I fulfilled my responsibility to remember to do that. The next step will be to remember to turn it off when we're done. And it is now 8:30, the start of the meeting. Welcome, everyone. For those of you who, I think I know everybody on the meeting, but I'm Jason Spetz with Emergency Management, and we're here for our first steering committee for the Hazard Mitigation Plan update for Dunn County. So thank you all for joining us, and for those who may join us later or watch the recording, thank you for participating in the committee. Happy to have you, and I think we got a good group to kind of guide this thing through, and we got Chris Strait here. I'll let you introduce yourself and take it from here.
Super, and appreciate it, Jason, and pulling everyone together. Let's see. I think I've got a slide that covers some of this. So, basic introductions. First part of the agenda, and we're really into that, but hazard mitigation planning, I'll talk about a little bit, give you some background in case you're not aware of what this process is about. I think most of you are or have been involved in the past. I'll talk about the status of some related grants. Then we'll run through the plan update scope. So what are we covering in your plan update and what's the process we're using? And then we're going to dig a little deeper I'll provide some data on trends and get into your homework. And so that's our agenda for today. As far as introductions go, I thought I would just go around and make sure I'm aware of who you all are, even though Jason knows you all. I don't necessarily. And so I'll just call out a name. If you could just give me your title and organization. I'll just start with Mary.
Hi there, Mary Purvis, Dunn County Aries Races.
Thank you, Mary. And I think Matt's with the fire department there in Menominee. He doesn't have audio this morning, you told us. And Randy?
Dunn County Board Supervisor, District 24, and Highway Committee Chairman.
Thank you, Randy. And Jason introduced himself. So Travis.
Travis Mayer, Captain of Field Services for the Sheriff's Office.
Thank you, Travis. Melissa.
Melissa Gillenbach, Director of Emergency Management and 911 here at Dunn County.
And Tara?
Sure. Tara Verdon. I'm the Emergency Management Coordinator at Mayo Clinic Health System in Menominee and Osseo.
Thank you, Tara. Rachel?
Rachel Wells. I'm the Land Information Officer here at Dunn County.
Thank you, Rachel. Catherine?
Good morning, Katie Gallagher with the Dunn County Health Department.
Thank you. And Paula. Well, we didn't hear you, Paula. Jason, who's Paula with?
That would be Paula Winter, and she's with Human Services here in Dunn County.
Oh, super. Wonderful. Great diversity of perspectives here. So we really appreciate that. Well, Paula's getting on her headset, so she's getting ready like me. So.
I apologize for being late.
No problem. And Ross just joined us. Ross is also with the Regional Planning Commission. So a little bit on myself, Regional Planning Commissions. I've been around since 2003 with regional planning, and the first task I got was working on a mitigation plan. At that point, it was for the city of Eau Claire, that and doing a flood study. So I've been kind of working in this realm for quite a while. The RPC, we're a unit of government, for those that don't aren't always familiar with RPCs, we don't have any regulatory authority, but we've been around since 71. And under statute, each of our member counties, our county boards, identifies 3 representatives to our board of directors, if you will, to our commission. And so you see that number 9 on the screen there. We have quite a diverse county, Clark County to St. Croix, the urban area kind of in the middle there of Eau Claire, Chippewa Falls, and then sort of stretching over into Menominee. So, got quite an area to cover. And as we go through this today, and I'll give you this, or I think I might have sent this out in advance, but I'll resend it. But based upon your experiences of familiar with your community, and the county as a whole, I want you to be thinking about, so what are the issues and challenges you're facing related to emergency management, hazards, mitigation. It could be specific, it could be general, it could be capabilities, the ability to respond or to recover. And then, is there any low-hanging fruit? Are there any strategies you've been kicking around? We need to update this plan. We need to conduct this study. We need to take this action. And so it's just a way to brainstorm right up front, and it gives us a chance to maybe it just spawns some questions when we start really sitting down with cities, villages, reaching out to towns and such. So today, more than any of the other meetings, is going to be just background, just set the stage. I want to talk about these plans and these related grants. I'm going to fly through these initial slides really quickly, but at any point, raise your hand or throw something out in chat or just speak up, interrupt me. I won't be offended. So what's mitigation? Mitigation is taking long-term action that will minimize or reduce losses. You're addressing vulnerabilities, losses to life, to property, to infrastructure, to the economy, to the community as a whole. Traditional actions for mitigation could be storm shelters or floodplain zoning, removing flood-prone structures, levees, landslide prevention, home ignition zones, if we're starting to talk wildfire, even their soil health best management practices that your land conservation offices are doing. And these plans that we're doing were really inspired in large part due to all the flooding in the lower Mississippi River, lower Missouri back in the 90s, where we saw the same communities being flooded again and again. And the federal government said, we can't stop putting these dollars into these repetitive losses. And then we had these other escalating costs, such as hurricanes and Katrina and Rita. And then out west, where my sister's right now in Northern California. She's federal government. She's responding to wildfire, and then tornadoes. So we're seeing all these escalating natural hazard costs, and so the federal government said, we know if we could get ahead of these and do some mitigation, that it saves us all as taxpayers. And so for every dollar invested, we can save the nation $6 overall in losses and in recovery costs. And so in 1999, they passed the Federal Disaster Mitigation Act of 2000. It focuses on natural hazards. So it's basically saying that we're going to put the federal government, we as a nation are going to put dollars towards mitigation. We're going to encourage these mitigation projects, but in order to access those mitigation grant funds, you need to have a plan in place. And so that's what we've been doing. Every 5 years, we update these plans, these mitigation plans. They need to include the natural hazards, and they typically occur at the county level. And so Dunn County adopts their plan. It covers all the unincorporated towns, with the county being the grant applicant. The cities and villages individually adopt. Electric co-ops and public utilities are also invited to adopt. Now, in the past, I've always, at least the last two plans I've done for Dunn County, we've included UW Stout, which was unusual. They were the only public educational institution in my region. Even UW Eau Claire didn't participate in the previous plans. But this time around, we're inviting all public education institutions to adopt because we've started to see school districts wanting to go after these dollars. School district received dollars for a safe room. So they built a whole new gym that's hardened to withstand 250-mile-per-hour plus winds, to withstand a tornado, direct hit. That safe room serves the entire school, but it also serves all the community as well. Abbotsford's done this. Owen Withy's done this. A number of schools have pursued these grant dollars. So we're inviting them to adopt. That way they can pursue the grant dollars directly without having to have the city or village be the grant applicant on their behalf, and then they're passing through the dollars. So these planning efforts are led by the county emergency managers, and then we facilitate. So we have a subcontractor agreement under the grant. So the county received a grant to put together these plans, to update these plans, and then we facilitate the process. And then Jason is your local lead, and you're our steering committee. And so we appreciate, and I know Lisa just joined us, was our regional Wisconsin Emergency Management representative. So glad she could participate. Now, these plans need to meet this lengthy checklist of things that are in the planning guidance by the federal government. And it's about 15 pages long. And so these aren't the most user-friendly documents. So it's not uncommon. Some of them get up towards 1,000 pages for some of the other counties. Ours are ranging probably around 500 once we start adding all those sub-plans. So for each, something we're doing different this time, for each city, village, and school, public educational institution, we're including a sub-plan. And so they'll each get their 6 to 10 pages mini plan specific to their community. That way they can focus in on that sub-plan without their strategies being buried amongst, and their analysis being buried amongst a whole bunch of different sections. We also did that because there were some changes in the planning guidance recently that they need to make sure they're meeting all those checklist things. And it just was easier to handle it this way. And so that's a big change, but it adds to the length of the plan. We've been talking internally. We're going to restructure them a little bit. We'll have like more of a data appendix, and then try to keep a more shorter main plan document to make it a little more accessible to folks, usable to folks. Then what we can also do is pull out those strategies, and we want you to help us prioritize those a little bit more. And I'll come back around to that in a bit. So these plans need to meet that checklist. They have to identify what are the risks, what are the hazards of significant risk to Dunn County, what's your event history, what is the probability of recurrence, and then what are the vulnerabilities. So if the event occurs, if the tornado hits, or if the 100-year flood occurs, what will potentially be the losses for Dunn County. But the strategies, the actions, the goals, they're locally defined. And that's where I'm going to need your help to nail those down in the end. Now, the grant, the plan is a prerequisite for these certain FEMA grants, as well as at least one state grant. But the actions, those recommendations, they're locally determined. We also don't draw a bright line between the mitigation and preparedness. I try to separate them some in the plan, but as I go through the process, if there's preparedness stuff that can help your integrated preparedness plan, your training plan that Jason has put together, or helps with another grant, or helps with inform the public health emergency preparedness plan, great. So we can use this to support your other efforts in the county. But you're not required to do everything that's in the plan. So it keeps the doors open for the grants, the mitigation grants. But there's no one saying you haven't implemented your plan, therefore we're not going to fund you, or there's no stick to I guess, if you don't implement everything in the plan. And now that's it. We don't want to put things in the plan you have no desire to implement, right? And I was already talking about a little bit what's in the plan. So there's got to be a vulnerability assessment and probability, and what's the extent of the hazard and the history. And so there's quite a bit on that checklist. As far as our region, City of Eau Claire was the first plan approved in the state back in 2001, 2002. Dunn County plans, we've put plans together in 2007, 2013, and 2020. So this is our third update, our fourth round of planning for you all. And I got a picture of Chippewa County there, but your plan expires October 26, 2025, which means after that date, we need to get this plan updated in order to apply for grant funding after that date. So we're going to fast track this and get this done this year, hopefully. That's the mitigation program in a nutshell. As far as mitigation planning and the history, talk a little bit about the grants. So there's 5 primary FEMA grants that are available for natural hazards. On an annual funding cycle are 2 programs. One is Building Resilient Infrastructure in Communities, that some of you may have been familiar with, a pre-disaster mitigation grant program. BRIC replaced that pre-disaster mitigation grant program. And then there's the Flood Mitigation Assistance Program. So the state will, when there's mitigation grant applications, they'll push those flood projects towards the FMA, and then the other projects would be fall more into that BRIC category. Those were pre-disaster. They were on an annual funding cycle, typically with a 25% local match, though for economically distressed rural community, the match could be as low as 10%, and that can include in kind. And FEMA also covers 100% of the grant management costs for these grants. So things like reporting on the grant and such, and even reimbursement for the grant application preparation if you're funded. The challenge with the BRIC right now, back in late March, the FEMA notified everybody they didn't accept any of the applications, wouldn't review any of the applications that were put in this past year. And then they also said, we are cutting the BRIC program, and then we're going to replace it with another mitigation approach. We don't know what that approach is. We don't know when that's going to be rolled out. And then, there's been lawsuits, and then about a month ago, the head of FEMA went on the record and said something to the effect that BRIC, no, we haven't canceled BRIC. And so there's a lot of uncertainty rolling around BRIC. Right now, we're assuming it's on hold. That didn't affect your grant application is the current interpretation, right? So we received a BRIC grant to update your plan, your grant contract, if you will. That contract was in place before FEMA said they were cutting BRIC. And so what we're doing is we'll be getting Jason an invoice for our cost to date real soon, and we're going to draw down in little chunks so we don't, incur a bunch of dollars and then somehow federal government later on tries to claw it back, right? And so if that's making sense, right now we believe we're okay to move forward with this plan update under our BRIC grant contract because that's been executed between the county and the state's already gotten that approval from the federal government on this program, this plan update. But we'll go slow in that. We'll do more incremental in those grant drawdowns. So we're not overextending, and no one's on the hook for a bunch of money if something changes, and then we'll go from there. So that's the BRIC and FMA. Hopefully BRIC will be replaced with something. HMGP, that's the Hazard Mitigation Grant Program. So anytime there's a presidential disaster declaration anywhere in the state of Wisconsin, Wisconsin Emergency Management, the state receives some dollars for mitigation projects. So Wisconsin Emergency Management, WEM, has discretion on where to use those dollars. In the past, they've often used those dollars for safe rooms because safe rooms often don't compete well nationally under the BRIC or PDM program. And so the HMGP is less competitive nationally. There's more discretion there. Another good thing with HMGP, the state kicks in half the local match. And so we're right now watching what happens down in Milwaukee area with all the recent floods. Will there be a presidential disaster declaration? And will the state receive any mitigation dollars? And if they do, if there's a declaration, they typically receive those dollars. The state may have some funds to implement some pick up some other mitigation projects even outside the Milwaukee area. There is after a wildfire disaster, there's a grant program. We don't see that in the state. I don't know if any of those have been funded. And there's also, we look at the high hazard dams. We keep those in the plan because there's another rehab program for those. Now, I'll note that some of your high hazard dams are owned by Excel, and Excel is not eligible because they're a FERC or a for-profit for those dams. There's also a state program that first year was last year, pre-disaster flood resiliency grant program, something like that. And there's been a lot of flood related studies that were funded last year. That program also requires the up-to-date mitigation plan. Oh, I have it on this page, pre-disaster flood resilience grants. So just FYI, part for Jason's sake, you don't need a mitigation plan for disaster, individual, or public assistance following a declaration. So that doesn't affect those, not required for the planning grants we just talked about. They're required for that BRIC and FMA. They're required for the HMGP at the time of a grant obligation. Also under HMGP, cooperatives and nonprofits are eligible to apply. And so the electric co-op could apply, for instance, under HMGP and be the applicant. I'll just skip through that. So I'm not going to go through this big long list here, but back in 2023, FEMA rolled out new planning guidance. So there was changes in language. There was some new things they were requiring us to include in our plans. And so we can't just take the last plan and just change some things. And then back in 2020, or this past April, FEMA came out and changed the guidance a little bit more, tweaked it a little bit more to remove certain things like climate, social vulnerability, some of that DEI type stuff. And so we're reacting to that as well. But one good sign is that, I suppose, is that FEMA didn't say we're cutting the planning requirements, right? They didn't cut the plan guidance, they updated it. And so they're recognizing, it appears, at least for now, the importance of mitigation planning. Overall, we've used these grant funds for almost $19 million worth of projects. We've got almost $1 million project up in Almena for a safe room pending yet. So we've used these for flood, mostly the biggest projects, flood mitigation. So buyout of flood prone structures, elevation of flood prone structures, flood proofing, a lot of acquisition, some flood studies, safe rooms or storm shelters, and bearing of power lines by electric co-ops. Biggest projects. Excel is not eligible for bearing the power lines because, again, they're for profit, but our co-ops have done some of that. Now, for the Dunn County hasn't tapped into these as much as many of our neighboring counties. So that's something we really want to keep aware of and try to address and have a plan at the end that prioritizes some things and we keep the discussion going. So when we meet with the cities and villages, we really want to stress that if you've got a project you need to advocate for it. Get it on WEM's radar. Continue to have these discussions. We're here to help continue those discussions, to make those connections with the state as needed. Lisa can help with some of that as well. So you've had about 356,000 in projects, probably about 75,000 of that's been these mitigation plans. Thanks for joining us, Mary. Now the other project you have was actually a landslide revetment. So what you stabilized some of riverbank along the red. I think it's along the Red Cedar. And so I think that's the only landslide revetment we've had in the whole county or in the whole region, our Summit County region. That definitely is an eligible project. So safe rooms, when I talk safe rooms, they need to be built to FEMA standards. You can't just dig a hole inside of a hill and throw a truck in, a semi truck trailer in that hole, right? So they have to be built to withstand those 250 mile per hour winds. We're now starting to see even higher than that in our region. 265, I think, was the last I saw. So maybe we need to be planning for 275 now. They can be above ground, they can be below ground, 5 square foot per person. FEMA will only cover the costs necessary for life safety and to meet codes. So they can be multi-use facilities, but they're not going to pay for showers or extra toilets beyond what's needed for your capacity of that safe room. They're not going to pay for landscaping and such. Now in the plan, we don't have to get too specific. We don't have to say for X number of people, but we got to show that there's an interest, there's a need, and this is a potential solution. So up in Chetek, you might remember back in 2018, May, I think it was, there was that tornado hit that between Chetek and Cameron, hit that mobile home park. We had 1 death, number of injuries, basically wiped out much of the mobile home park. After the fact, the county was the grant applicant and entered an agreement with the private landowner to build a safe room that the private landowner now owns and manages according to an operations and maintenance plan. And this is essentially the building. It's a single-use facility in this case. It's just a block and concrete structure. It's a bunker meant, tornado will hit the area and this will be the only thing standing. In fact, this doesn't even have plumbing. It has chem toilets inside, or a chem toilet, because it's such small capacity. Now, more recently, we built a safe room as part of the Northern Wisconsin State Fairgrounds. In the past, we've talked about a potential safe room at the county fairgrounds there in Menominee. This is perhaps a model because there's camping on site up there. And this is meant to be, many of the smaller events, this has enough capacity. But when you've got, the grandstands full, this isn't going to cover that, right? So this is for the overnight guests, security, and vendors, campground folks, during the larger events, but it'll cover most of the small events. So it's 311 person capacity, $1.5 million total project costs, 814,000 was grant funded, but in the end there was only $52,000 out of pocket for that much building because of, in this case, they qualified for the 10% match, I believe, because of some COVID dollars, special exception. But it can take a while, so they applied for the brick in late 2020. We helped them put together the application. So it was, I think it was January 2021, the grant application went in with the county as applicant. But then we came back, that's right, we came back and reapplied as HMGP. The state said, we're not competing well under brick. Let's fund this under HMGP because they had some disaster dollars left over from COVID. So it's now built. But these things, you got to have a little patience. So if you got to plan ahead. But they can be multi-use. So they hardened everything in the red. They paid for some extra restrooms, but they didn't harden the concession stand. They hardened the storage because you've got to be able to take the the chairs and the tables out if they got 4-H displays or something in there and put them into a storage area. But FEMA's not going to pay for the square foot of the storage area because it's not contributing to your life safety function, right, for your people. They didn't harden the showers on the exterior. That gives you a sense of this, what these might look like. Hoffman Hills or Hoffman Park over in River Falls has done something similar. We just got funded and we just actually bid out construction for a safe room at our largest mobile home park here in Altoona. So it's almost a $900 person capacity in the end, because this was also 10% local match, 10% state. In this case, local cost share for this facility, which 1.8 million in all. Federal share, local cost share was 58,000 cash. So it can be a pretty good deal. An example of the safe room up in Luck I talked about earlier, covers the whole community. But yeah, there's flood projects, flood buyouts, but you can also do things like combine these things. So this project over in Ohio had some buyout of 4 flood-prone structures and then turn the area into a large rain garden or stormwater retention area, essentially, with nature-based. That's a nature-based solution with walking paths and also used as a educational opportunity. You can also do studies. You can do these things in phases. You're not sure what the flood mitigation solution is, or you've got a couple different options. You can pay for the study and then come back later and that study becomes the grant. The results of that becomes the grant application for the actual effort. And education. Oops, that should say Clark County Natural Hazard Awareness 2012. We did a traveling exhibit, public service announcements, brochures, and we distributed weather radios to seniors through the ADRC with the Aries races. The ham radio folks, emergency ham radio folks, did the programming of the radios, and their time for programming those weather radios was used towards to help pay for a significant part of the grant match. We also did presentations to the towns and brought in engineers to talk about stormwater engineering. We were having some problems with over in Clark County, where one town would build a bigger culvert, and all of a sudden the town downstream was getting all the flooding, right? And so thinking more watershed level. That was a lot to cover, but any questions, grant programs at this point? All right. Well, if anything comes up, we can talk through that. So I want to talk about your project a little bit. I believe we sent out the brochure with the agenda. This is what we use when I go into city and village meetings or when we send out the town survey. So it's a quick way to give an introduction, high level, and we can always do additional outreach as needed. And here, yeah, I knew I had this slide in here somewhere. So I talked about this a little bit earlier. So the planning guidance from FEMA went into effect in 2023, made some content changes to both what needs to be in the plan as well as process changes. They wanted to get more involvement from businesses, academia, nonprofits, other community lifelines. And so we're hoping, you all coming and joining us as part of the steering committee is helping us to check some of those boxes. As I was mentioning, the checklist is lengthy. There's a lot of stuff in it. I'm not going to go through it all. It's 14, 15 pages. Then for each jurisdiction that participates, for the county, each city and village that participates, as well as each educational institution, we've got to check all the boxes. Did we include a risk assessment? Did we have mitigation strategy? Did we talk about their capabilities and maintenance and plan up? So that's one reason we went with this sub plans for our other partners through this. The good thing is we've went through this process and our approach has been accepted for Barron, Polk, St. Croix, and Eau Claire counties by FEMA. So we know we're meeting this latest guidance from 2023. And so your plan is going to end up looking something like this, where there's going to be a community section 2 community introduction, right? Section 1 background stuff, process. Section 2 community profile. This is background, big picture data. Talk about those community lifelines, what we used to call critical facilities. And then we assess the hazards of significant risk. You have to do capabilities assessment, section 4, which used to be, we used to call it just mitigation actions, but now it's a little broader. So is the county resilient? Kind of asking those questions. So are there needs as far as training or planning, studies, those kind of things? So it's a big table, and I'll work with Jason to make sure that's updated. And basically, I take all the input from the meetings and do take my best shot at, and then pass on to Jason, Melissa, to help update. Then we have our goals and strategies, and then adoption and maintenance, and then we'll have our sub plans. So that'll be the main document, and then we'll have this second supplemental document that has a lot more data, and just making sure we check all the boxes in that large FEMA checklist. As far as process goes, we've got 3 to 4 meetings scheduled with you all. Like I said, we're going to try to get this, have something adoptable by the end of the year. So we are planning to meet again in October. Between now and then, we're hoping to start all of our city, village, town meetings, commence our stakeholder interviews, and we've already reached out to the public educational institutions. Then in our next meeting, we'll get more into the risks and vulnerabilities and capabilities, and maybe even start talking goals. So by the end of October, we've got those draft mini plans out to the cities, villages, educational institutions. And we're starting to see the plan come together by the end of October. And then we'll have our meeting. Between that meeting, that second and third meeting, there's probably going to be some homework for you all to help us assess the different strategies. So help us select what recommendations and what those should be prioritized. Then we'll have a fourth meeting as needed. We'll play it by ear. I'll be honest, one of the benefits of having this group is to help the county meet their in-kind grant match, right? And so by having those meetings, it does help. And so, Ross, if you can you take a screenshot of the screen? And we know we lost Mary, but I need to make sure I'm tracking who's at these meetings, and we'll figure out a way to document that, have you sign off on it at some point. I'd like to have at least one of the meetings in person, in part because I can also consider your travel time and mileage, if you have to travel to get to the meeting, but that's critical. So we're hoping to have the draft plan fully done by December. The only part of this where when we meet with the city and villages, I need to find out, as well as the county, is there anyone targeting that Wisconsin Emergency Management, that state pre-disaster flood resiliency grant program? That grant is typically due in November, and your plan expires in late October. If someone's really wanting to go after that this year, we're going to need to maybe tweak this and super fast track, right? And figure out a way to at least get their sub plan done and get the bulk of the county level plan done in time. And that's kind of a tall ask at this point. What happened is, when I said that earlier, I talked about how back in February or in late March, FEMA put a hold on the BRIC program. And this, as well as the state, Wisconsin Emergency Management, we didn't know what was happening to your grant that was funding this plan update. And we went back and forth with the county. We went back and forth with the state. At one point, the state was even under the impression that these grants would probably get cut back in April, but we just didn't know. Depends on how you read it. We were optimistic, but it wasn't until later in June before the state said, we're now interpreting this that, everything's still a go, right? And so we've essentially put your project on hold from April, May, June, and we got started, by July, we're going back and forth with the county saying, okay, let's put together a steering committee, let's get this going and figure out what's the county board want to do. And so we're moving ahead now. But we're kind of behind. We lost some time. So if we had time, which will make that October, or that makes that state flood grant in November, if they have it again, that makes it a challenge to get this update in time for that. So plan progress. We're collecting the data. Ross is doing a lot of that. We're also coordinating with County GS and coordinating with Rachel's office to get some of that data. Anytime Rachel spends, her office, anytime the county spends during the grant funding cycle, during this year, that we can use that data or use your time that contributes surveys. You did a community survey. If that contributes and we can integrate it into the mitigation plan, we can count that as part of that grant match, right? But we also rely on that input and rely on the flood analysis that the county GIS can do to help us beef up the assessment section of the study. Now, the cities and villages, we're going to begin those meetings later in September and October. Just FYI, I've got some neck surgery next week, so I'm going to be out for a couple of weeks. And so we're going to pick this. Ross is going to maybe start some of those city and village meetings, and I'll pick them as needed. I'll jump in and do any or all of them later in September and October. Town surveys, and this is something I need your input on. Typically, I do a presentation to the Towns Association. They have their quarterly meetings, and then we mail a survey. We don't meet with towns unless they've got a project. Then I'll meet with them or do a Teams meeting or Zoom meeting or something. However, because of the delays and things, by the time I got a hold of the town association rep, they had their agenda set for July. They didn't have time for us. And so at this point, I could wait till their next meeting, July, August, September, so it's going to be probably October, then mail the town survey. Could be a bit tight, or we could just mail the survey. It'd be kind of a cold mailing. It wouldn't be, I guess not, I don't know if it'd make a big difference in the response rate, but do you have any thoughts on that? We could mail it now and I could still do the presentation, still get on their agenda for October.
What did the WCA Dunn County representative or Towns Association representative, what was her perspective or his perspective?
I didn't ask her if we should mail it. I'm sorry. Great question, Katie. I should have. I could check with a couple people. We've got town contacts. As you maybe know, we're working with the county right now on an update to your comprehensive plan, right? So we've already been surveying the towns to some degree. Also, in fact, I'm meeting Thursday in Menominee on update to the Menominee Sewer Service Area Plan, and there will be some. Actually, the secretary clerk for the town association will be at that meeting probably, as well as some adjacent towns, Sherman and such. So I could ask them.
I think that would be a good idea, Chris. I would like to have them involved as much as possible, so.
Okay.
I know from when I've worked with the Towns Association, they have a good email group between all the townships and maybe a way to communicate with all of them in a format where they can respond as well.
I will check on Thursday. I'll find out about the best way to communicate, and I'd still love to get on their agenda, and I could update them on the program and say, okay, if you didn't get your survey in, this is your last call. We need it quick, right? We typically we're lucky if we get 12 of them back, surveys from the towns, and I'm really looking for potential projects or unique risks or losses or vulnerabilities. We all get winter storms. We're all at risk of tornadoes, but do they have something that has them really concerned? Well, we've got this neighborhood that's got problems with repetitive flooding. So that's what we're really looking for. Or this highway gets washed out every time we have a 5-inch rain. And so, okay, I'm gonna plan to go to that October meeting, but I'm gonna ask about sending the survey now versus just waiting. I hate to wait because of the time, but if they're quick about it, we would have time. So I'll check on Thursday. Thanks. We did a webinar. We did 2 webinars. So we invited the schools, public educational institutions. We had a couple of webinars to introduce. They could attend one of the 2. They could attend both if they wanted, but that'd be kind of redundant. But we have school districts from Menominee, Elk Mound, Boyceville, and Colfax have already completed their online survey. So for schools, we also don't sit down with all the schools, but we have a lengthy survey online that we use to put together the sub plans, and then we get their sub plans for them to review. And actually, that's a great response rate. I think we only had 3 up in Polk, for instance, right off the top of my head, participate. Even the City of Eau Claire's school district didn't participate. And so, we can do some more outreach, maybe working with Jason or Melissa. I don't know if you've got a school contact list and give them another shot at. There's time to still get more. Now, UW Stout, I want to sit down with, and Jason's got good contacts there. We've always sat down with them or do another Zoom type Teams meeting. They're unique. They still need to do the online survey, but it'd be good to have that communication because it's a little more complicated. So I think we're doing good at school. So Melissa and Jason, do you have like a school contact list, your own?
We do, and we can get that to you.
Okay.
Yep.
Because we did
Melissa, when is our next Safe Schools meeting? We get together with the school districts. When is the next one coming up? Do you know by chance? Or Travis?
Yeah, let me look at my calendar quick.
But yeah, we have good relations with the schools and can get whatever we need.
And I'm guessing some of our response rate may be because we don't necessarily have those contacts. So we sent a letter to all the administrators, and then we did an email to all the administrators based upon the contact information we get through DPI. But that's not necessarily who should be getting the invite, right? So it doesn't necessarily make it all the way down the chain. So yeah, if you've got a schools meeting and if I could piggyback on that's great too. And we could even have a little discussion on what their risks or vulnerabilities and take some little Q&A if needed. So
The next meeting is in October, so
October?
might be a little tight, but
Yeah, it's all going to be tight. Yeah, we can figure something out. So stakeholder interviews, meetings. So we don't just rely on you all, and as a group, we'll be chatting with many of you individually as well as county department heads. I usually ADRC, public health, super important. Land con, planning and zoning, emergency management, sheriffs, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So this is an all hazards plan, multi-hazard plan. So the county's elected not to just focus on the natural hazards. So only those natural hazards are eligible for those certain FEMA grant programs I talked about earlier. But there's other grants, there's other reasons to consider other hazards facing the county. So many of our other counties have included active shooters, active threats, workplace violence. We often include hazmat spills. Long-term power outage has always been in your plan, in part because it's often natural hazards, but it's not always. Great, Paula. Yeah, we could maybe it's yourself and Human Service and ADRC and some other folks from social services if they're in it, especially if we start talking about special populations or those kind of needs. Yeah, so we have these interviews. Sometimes IT, right? Cybersecurity is often in many of the plans. So sometimes I do those in person. Sometimes, and I love to do like highway commissioner. I like to do those in person, or highway shop folks, because I can throw a map on the table, right, and circle things. These are where we've had issues with flooding. Others like IT, I can do through the phone. Facilities can do through the phone and or Teams call, that kind of thing. So I like to sit down with Dunn Energy. I've always involved them. They have also approved the plan in the past, basically through a letter, since they don't do resolutions. I typically do a presentation to the Fire Association. I don't know when your next meeting for those folks are. Do you know offhand? Fire chiefs.
Yeah, I can look it up. I know I got you on the agenda. I think that would be this month. It should be the third Thursday, but yeah, you're on the agenda, Chris. And well, oh, there's Matt. He knows everything. Yeah, he'll get the date back here.
Would
Fire
it be
chiefs.
September, Jason? Because didn't we have one in July?
Yeah, it's
September.
well, yeah, September. I guess
Yeah.
it is still August.
So it's
Yeah.
typically you're looking for the date?
It is, yeah, it is, oops, 18th of September.
September 18th.
So, yeah, in 3 weeks. So, yeah, September 18th at, for you, Chris and Ross, it'd be at the North Side Fire Station in Menominee. So, 7 p.m. You're on the agenda.
I think that's
Roger?
where we met last time.
Yeah. So at least one of those is conveniently timed.
Yeah, I should be back at it by then. If not, Ross will step in. Uh, Typically, we do a brief survey of the chiefs, fire association. I don't know. Does EMS join you at that?
Yes, they are represented.
Okay,
Yep.
great. And it'll ask. I remember the last time I think we met, there was some low hanging fruit regarding wildfire, though I'm not sure if we had a full wildfire section in the plan. They talked about it would be there was concern, especially near the lakes, of can they get the vehicles down some of the driveways, right? So can we go out and buy a banner to put on the side of the fire trucks like they had over in Neilsville they use? And so we'll just chat through, the plan as a whole. But really, what are their concerns? Are there anything we can act upon? Any needs for the different hazards? But we do a brief survey that they can take with them and get back to us. And it asks things like, do you need any dry hydrants? Right? Because there's a separate DNR grant for that. And are you having problems with access? And so does the local communities involve you in permitting, site plan review? those kind of things. So super. And then we need to schedule something with UW Stout at some point. I know Jenny well from the Red Cross. Is there anybody else we need to make sure we're chatting with? Paula mentioned involving her department with ADRC, the larger department, I should say. Anybody, stakeholders?
Chris, I just wanted to mention for the group, I know you know this, but we do have Jolene from Dunn Electric that's part of the steering committee. She just happens to, this was not a good day for her. She's at a conference this week, so she will be part of this group, and she says she's looking forward to the recording and doing her homework. So we do have that. I think that's an important stakeholder to have in this group. So just FYI for everyone else.
That's wonderful. That's great. And we'll be touching base with them individually with the electric co-op, or is it energy, right? Dunn Energy. Any related plans? I mentioned the IPP, Integrated Preparedness Plan. I mentioned the Public Health Emergency Preparedness Plan as well, which is important for, outreach to special populations, but also just the communicable disease aspects, how we're going to approach that, zoonotic disease, communicable disease. Any other plans, though, that are related to this effort that I need to be aware of? Studies, programs?
We do have our Dunn County strategic plan, Chris, that kind of deals with a lot of the offsite planning for hazardous spills and our plans for some hazmat related stuff. And I know you mentioned that was part of, that could be part of this all hazards plan as well. So we can look at that if that's something that might be of interest.
And that's a county level strategic plan?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Then you would have your
Question,
emergency.
is that
go ahead.
the spill plan, or is that the strategic plan? So there's a directional plan for the county, which is a little different. Or are you thinking more along the lines of what the LEPC puts together? Or am I off base?
Yeah, this is the plan, the strategic plan that the LEPC actually approves, and we review it. We'll be set to review it again in December and sign off on it every year. That kind of lists our offsite facilities and different hazmat related concerns in the county.
Yeah, thanks for the clarification, KT. Is there a Dunn County strategic plan?
There's a directional plan, but I would say it's outdated. I think it was last done in, Melissa, do you remember, was it 15?
Okay.
17, maybe?
Yeah, maybe that's 17, it feels like. Mhm.
Yeah, that's the one that water quality was like right up there towards the top of the list. Okay, gotcha. You have your emergency operations plan. That was my next question, Lisa. There you go. How about continuity of operations plans, continuity of government planning? The county
Yes,
have?
we all have those. Would you say, KT, that they were updated this year? I mean, we went through a little mini exercise just recently, so yeah, we have them.
So you even exercised your continuity plans.
Kind of. Some of part of it, I shouldn't say all of it, but one of the notifications was kind of our main goal, and we did exercise that in July.
That's wonderful. And then Jason you folks have your emergency operations plan. Is that what you call
Yes.
it?
Yep, yep, that's what we call it, and we have that as well, and that just went around for updates and sign-offs, so yeah, that's of course available.
Okay. Anything
Yep.
else you can think of?
Mm-mm.
Super. Well, this is, like I said, it's helping me fill out that capabilities assessment part. But also if it affects any strategies, if there's something that needs to be updated or you want certain testing on, we can work those into strategies. Moving ahead then. So I've got about a half hour I believe. I can't remember what time we said we were going to wrap this up. We said 10:30, so I guess I got an hour, but I don't want to keep you all that long. So I'm going to run through some data before we get to your homework assignment, and I want to hear about your experiences. But before we begin, do you know? Here's a pop quiz: ninth deadliest tornado in U.S. history. I think it's still ninth. I should check this. Any guesses where?
Colfax.
New Richmond.
There you go, Lisa.
Oh, darn.
Yep. It was New Richmond, 1899. The carnival or fair was in town, which added to the deaths. And it started as a water spout on, I guess, Lake St. Croix or on the river, and communication wasn't what it is today, right? And I think that's one of the reasons why you don't see a lot of older buildings or neighborhoods there in New Richmond, right? If you ever driven around, and I just can't imagine the cleanup today from something like that, right? All the chemicals and things, electronics, and what we have today, but can't imagine cleaning that up back then. Now, 59 years later, about 50 miles east on June 4th, 1958, 67 years ago, not to say we're due, I think you're aware of what that was. So it's the Colfax tornado. Depending on the source, 19 to 20 deaths. I'm guessing it's probably the 20. Over 165 million, adjusted for inflation and property damage. Over 400 farms, 1,000 other buildings. So obviously we're at risk, right? Tornadoes. So how about this tornado? It's a little farther east. This is out in Eau Claire. Kind of a trick question. It's not really a tornado, it's a straight line wind. But it goes to show that those winds can be just as damaging to property and life, especially get those large span buildings and such. So I think what we're watching here is we have the wind speeds maps that we've used in the past. I think we're starting to see that maybe those are outdated. Things seem to be shifting north. Are we now becoming part of that tornado alley? We have gotten over 250-mile-per-hour winds up here in Wisconsin from past events, and so we had one of our recent grant applications. We got dinged because the safe room was going to be designed for 250-mile-per-hour winds, and one of the grant reviewers said that you had 265-mile-per-hour winds, so you should be designing for 275, right? So we're trying to adjust to those kind of trends. So for Dunn County, your past disaster declarations, they've been tornadoes, flooding, severe storms. There's your list of those disaster declarations. I might have said applications, but disaster declarations. So federal declarations. That means the damages were such that you met the threshold. A small community can get hit by something and not meet these thresholds. And like the polar vortex back 2014, 2015, a lot of water mains broke in the region. but just didn't meet those thresholds to trigger federal disaster declarations. And now we see that, the federal government does have some discretion on what they declare or not declare. The positive is that you haven't seemed to have met any threshold since 2002 in terms of disasters. The negative is that you've still had disasters, right? They just haven't been declared. You've still had damages due to winds or tornadoes or flooding. Yeah, there's quite a stretch there where 1998 through 2002. I think the thing we saw in 1993 that really changed is just how we saw places flood in 1993 due to heavy rains that hadn't flooded in the past. And so that was a real large scale, almost statewide flood event, over 740 million in reported damage. So that's the other thing, maybe times damage is not reporting. The second graph just shows we've had some drought periods. We're not in one right now, but from that 2003 to about 2012, we went through a long period of drought. We haven't really had a drought that dried up a lot of wells since the 70s, where you got those sand point, more shallow wells. But we did see some lakes and things back in 2010, dry up and such. So as far as your significant natural hazard events, these next couple slides where we see these pink tables, they're all from the National Climatic Data Center, National Weather Service. So it's events that got reported, and the damages are often underreported. So as we go through this process, we interview and ask questions to get feedback on, so what was your experience? Or sometimes we learn about events that were really significant for the community that just never made it into the federal database. But tornado events since 1950 to 2024, you've had almost 600 million adjusted for inflation and property damage. You have had the deaths, 21 in total from tornado events. So in terms of deaths, that's your number one hazard, natural hazard. High winds, thunderstorms, like I said, can be just as damaging. Now, many of these other tables, we only report the damage since 1993 in them because the earlier data is really spotty for these other hazards. They kept the tornado damage going way back to 1950. The other hazards, not so much. So the averages become a little more important. But even since 93, almost 9 million in reported property damage, adjusted for inflation. You have had deaths, you have had injuries from high winds in the county. You also had deaths from other thunderstorm, lightning, hail related events that weren't necessarily, but could be related to high winds. And so those can be damaging as well. So regarding tornadoes and high winds, thunderstorms, lightning, hail, anything that's got you concerned since perhaps the last plan? Any new events, recent events, tornadoes? Hit the county?
I think we had some small tornadoes since then, and then didn't they back down on that, Jason? But that's the only thing that I know of.
Yeah. Yeah, we had the flooding event from just the other day, or from last July here. We had a flooding event, but tornadoes, I think there hasn't been anything.
Nothing you've
Yeah,
had
wind
claim.
events and flooding is what we've been having the last few years.
Okay. So there's been some winds and anything
Yeah.
unusual with those events or large scale damages or injuries?
No,
Deaths?
just
Okay.
trees and things like that. No real large scale damage. The flooding town of Menominee had some flooding this year that washed out some roads, and things like that that they're uh, working on.
Okay.
And we're still dealing, of course, with the Chippewa River and the bank stabilization that we got a grant 4 years ago. We had one canceled in the whole process here last year. So, but yeah, nothing new, I guess, that I
You
can
said
think of.
you had a brick application submitted that wasn't funded for
Yeah,
flood effort.
yeah,
Okay.
it was part of the cancellation group. It never made it to never made it through the signatures before it got canceled. How about that?
Yeah. So I'll want to at some point. I don't know if someone could share a summary of that. Is that floating around somewhere? That application?
Oh yeah, I've got all the
Okay.
paperwork on that.
Yeah, that I want to make sure we keep that in the plan. So I don't think you're unusual in tornado events, for this region. See, all of our counties except Eau Claire are in orange there as far as number of events. The thing is, Eau Claire's, a smaller county, so probably fewer events, right? Plus it's east-west. Though Eau Claire County's been getting hit and socked, down towards Augusta, down towards where I live, recently. Lightning, hail, we do have a band of hail that seems to run up towards Rice Lake at times. And you're catching some of that. Winter storms, winter related events, another fairly common hazard. Not a lot's getting reported as far as damages. You have had some winter related deaths. Flooding, fewer events, more damages. And you just mentioned the Menominee flooding. Yeah, we'll want to make sure we get information in the plan regarding those significant flood events since the last plan. Droughts, we talked about those drought periods earlier. The NCDC data isn't the greatest for the drought data. So any other changing trends, concerns regarding winter flooding, flash flooding, droughts? County highway spends quite a bit. So I can pull some of that data from what they report to the state as far as number of crashes and how much is spent in labor to maintain at least the state highway, state and county highways. Flooding, we're overall we're pretty lucky compared to southern Wisconsin, southwest, southeast. But we still have our hot spots. Extreme heat, number one natural hazard killer in Wisconsin. But we don't have the urban area, so we haven't seen those numbers, or we typically don't have as many concerns as say some of those urban areas. But it's seniors, and those are on medication, a higher vulnerability to this extreme heat. Then wildfire. Oh shoot, I didn't trade out for your map. I don't believe you have any. Correct me if I'm wrong. Do you have any DNR intensive fire protection areas? Is everything cooperative? Offhand?
I'm not aware that we have any.
Yeah, I'm not either. And I was thinking, Matt says they usually call them if needed. So there you go.
Right. Right. So I know early on the first couple rounds of your mitigation plans, we did not include wildfire. But I believe we added it this past round. It might have been a full section, in part because you don't have that landscape or a lot of development necessarily in pine plantation. There's a little of that. It's not that sandier soil with a lot of jack pine that we see in parts of Polk, Barren, Eau Claire, Clark. And so as we go through this, I'll need guidance on whether or not we keep that in the plan. What the fire chiefs told me, you're still very prone to grass fires. So it's not that typical wildfire that we see in most mitigation plans. You can kind of see it on that map to the, I'll get this out of the way. Sorry about that. I don't know if I can zoom in a little bit. So you kind of see the Dunn County here. The oranges are towns of concern. They have some elevated risk. And those are those along those lakes. It's development in what they call WUI, wildland urban interface. Perhaps some safety measures, some gosh, what is it? Firewise type practices, driveway assessments, could be. Are you protecting your home? You know, are you allowing grass or wood being stored on your porch, or under some pine trees that are right next door? You know, so and keeping your gutter clear of pine needles. So there's those kind of things we could potentially include in the plan. So this is one of those hazards where I'm not sure whether to include it or not. We have seen more counties including extreme heat and extreme cold. We typically address extreme cold as part of the winter storms, and you've always had that. Can't remember if you had extreme heat in the last plan offhand, but more counties have added that since the last round of mitigation plan updates, just given trends. Another source of data we have is your public health offices and hospital representatives and such. As a region completes a hazard vulnerability assessment. Some of you, obviously, KT, has seen this data. Now, this is from a health perspective. And so this was there based upon, and it's a pretty detailed approach. They look at, so what's the probability, what's the vulnerabilities, and what's the ability to respond internally and externally, and they score each hazard. That's a long list of hazards. And then this is really the culmination of all that. And so the stuff that's in number one, they all tied for being their top hazard: blizzard, stream flood, ice storm, winter snowfall, all winter related. So all those winter stuff. Then you had severe thunderstorms. That could include the lightning. That could include maybe the high winds. Then you had communications issues. So that's your number one. Seasonal influenza, number two. That's probably typically not something addressed in mitigation plans. What we'll typically do, though, we'll have a communicable disease section. And it'll be kind of in the front end, but we largely refer to the public health emergency preparedness plan. And so we meet with KT and her staff to work through that, and you can still have strategies in the mitigation plan related to that, but we don't dive quite as deep as like the flood analysis for that hazard. And seasonal influenza, I'm not sure if that fits in there or not. It can. Polk County, we spent time talking about tick bites, right? What's the experience from COVID? That's more of a typical. Up in Barron County, we spent time talking about avian flu, right? So you can customize that section, or if something rises to the top and it needs more time, we can spend more time on that hazard. Number three there, cyber attack. That's become more of a full section. The challenge we have is local data. especially risks and vulnerabilities, just really isn't there. And so, and the strategies tend to be more of education. You know, you could promote, do all the cities, villages, even towns, critical facilities. They have cyber insurance, something like that. But number 3 also includes tornado. So tornado, thunderstorm, your typical, 1 in 3 typical natural hazards. 4, active shooter, civil unrest. They can go together to some extent. All that active violence, workplace violence could be in there. Emerging infectious disease, that's communicable disease, zoonotic disease, pandemic, infectious disease outbreak. All those plus influenza could be part of that. Measles could be all part of that discussion with the communicable disease section. Then wildfire. Now you got to keep in mind this is a regional HVA. It's not specific to Dunn County. And so there are areas in Northwest Wisconsin that have much higher traditional wildfire risk than you all. Flooding, HVAC, failure, gas leak, power outage. So power outage is a little low on, but still number 4. Yeah, all those things, number 4 all tied, right? So I shouldn't say it's low. It's just not number 1. As a regional planner, I do get concerned. I'm concerned with power outage in that we have seen like Montreal area back in, gosh, it must be 20, 25 years ago, got hit hard, which you spin that globe and we're about as far north, almost as far north as that. And they were out in January, they were out of power for like 14 days in some areas. So if you combine that power outage due to an ice storm and then followed up with extreme cold at a regional scale event affecting multiple counties, those kind of things got me concerned. Now we can also compare, Dunn, these, yes, Rachel, these stats were from the health hazard vulnerability assessment completed by public health entities in Northwest Wisconsin. I wasn't real clear on that, was I? And so like your public health offices, your hospitals, other health agencies completed these. And so it's compiled, it's multi-county. Now the FEMA has completed what they call the National Risk Index, and this is comparing each county to national averages. And so luckily, our region's relatively low compared to national risk. And we typically score pretty high in resiliency. We've got good emergency management infrastructure. We've got good response infrastructure. I don't know if they take into consideration, but our folks, our residents, many of them know how to handle a chainsaw. They're able to respond, right? They're able to get by. They're not large concentrations of low income or folks unable to respond. Now we do have some higher vulnerability with like large student population, Menominee perhaps, or growing seniors might need some assistance. But overall, we're pretty good. That's that social vulnerability. It's relatively low. There's that aspect of it. Annual losses, we're still expected to get losses though. And so if you take, this is meant to be a slideshow and not showing you this way. So this is breaking it down by hazard. So where do we fall nationally? Well, cold wave. We're relatively high cold wave. Well, that was also HVA showed cold wave. So cold, ice storms, landslide, These are our highest numbers: lightning, tornado, winter weather, all strong winds. Oh, I should have circled that one. Maybe this should be, oh, that should have been down there. But anyway, yeah, I'll move that down. So winds, right? This is just relative. Yeah, so earthquake, probably not going to score high in your homework. I don't need to tell you. You folks know your community. You know what these things are. Risk, even if tornado isn't your highest tornado, relatively moderate risk on a national level. However, estimated annual losses, they're saying on average, you're losing $3 million a year in tornado losses, almost 2.5 in strong wind losses, based upon the data reported to the NCDC. We know that that data doesn't include all the losses. It'll include what's many times what's reported by the emergency manager and or what's reported in terms to the state in terms of many times that's just public losses. It doesn't include like what's being insurance might be covering, right, from the latest hailstorm, right? I know the hood of my car still got dings in it, and I still haven't done anything about it from the last hailstorm I went through. So each year, you got $5.5 million on average the county's losing. Now, you're not losing all that in a single year. You're going to have $15 million in one year, and then you go 3 years without it. So those are your annual losses.
Chris, our meeting ends at 10 and I just don't want to lose anybody else because of commitments. So I don't know if you wanted to, kind of tie it up for today. I just don't want to lose a lot more people
Okay, I'm sorry.
due to scheduling.
I had 8:30 to 10:30 on the agenda, so I was off. I was thinking something different.
Yeah, the meeting was only scheduled till 10.
Oh, okay. Didn't know that. Okay, so I don't know what you've had for hazmat spills since 2019. Anything significant? Probably not. It's probably some smaller
No.
spills.
No,
But we have had some other events in terms of COVID. I don't think you've had any active shooter, active threat, anything significant that I've heard over there.
no.
We're seeing increasing cyber attack threats, right?
Yes.
Yeah, we know that long-term weather patterns are changing. I've heard that through the ag perspective, heavy rain events and such, but many of our communities will talk about that. So what I really want to get to is there's two things I'm going to send out as homework, and I think I already sent them out, but I'll reiterate. Number one, do you have any of those issues, challenges, opportunities, things you can do, right? So there's that form that will be sent out as homework. I didn't flip it out for Dunn versus Clark, but on the screen here, but you'll get one that says Dunn County on it. And so just brainstorming, are there issues? Are there things you can do? And then your main homework is this sheet. So to explain this sheet, and again, I didn't flip it out for Clark, but it says Dunn County on there, and it'll have your numbers based upon the National Risk Index and the HVA, the Health Vulnerability Assessment stuff we just went through from the public health perspective. And so there's really what I'm looking for is you to fill out these first two columns, but also include your name and time spent, because if you spend a half hour on it, we can count towards the grant match. So probability is the frequency of past occurrences or the likelihood of it occurring in the future. So as we just saw, earthquakes probability is going to be low, right? Now, if you get an earthquake, what are the damages? That's the vulnerability. Well, if an earthquake happens in the area, it's probably also going to be pretty low. Better example, thunderstorms, higher probability, right? You have 5+ thunderstorms a year, 6. maybe more. However, it's not a lot of impact for all those storms, right? It's going to have a lower, moderate losses. Tornadoes happen less frequently than the thunderstorms. So you might have a 4 or 5 on thunderstorms. You can do 4.5, doesn't matter. Tornadoes, you might have a 3, less frequent. Tornadoes, higher impact though. You might have a 4 or 5 over there. Thunderstorms, you might have a 3 on vulnerability. So that's the homework. Take your best shot at that. We'll use that. I'll work with Jason and Melissa to figure out and finalize what hazards we want in the plan. So please try to complete that by the 15th. Then we're going to commence with those interviews, those meetings, as I talked about. Then we'll next meet in October, talk about progress, highlights, capabilities, goals, etc. Anything else? Any final comments? Anything else, Jason, Melissa, to add?
No, I think you covered everything very well, and of course, we're coming from it at an angle where we kind of knew what you were going to say too. So we'll see what the rest of the group thinks, but you'll send that stuff out. I know you sent some of it out, but you'll send that out again with just a little explanation as far as the homework assignment.
Yes, I'll do that. Yep.
Yeah. Yep.
Well, I
And
think
I guess the
everybody.
only other thing would be for the next meeting, will you just do another poll to see when people can get that on their schedules and
That
for
sounds
whenever
great.
you're ready for the next one. I that seemed to work pretty well.
Yeah, early morning works for most folks, sounds like. Okay. We'll try that.
Okay. Yeah, other than that, I don't have anything else.
Well, thanks all, and you can reach out to me or Jason at any point if you got questions or additional thoughts, and I'll be contacting many of you individually as we move forward.
All right, sounds good. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks all.
Thank you.